Okay, so for 10-3 part 2, we did the missing side in the first video. Now I'm going to be talking about missing angle. Now for missing angle, this is very similar first few steps as missing side. And I'm actually going to use the worksheet you did on day 1 or part 1, where we set up the different proportions here. We're going to do the second part of that, okay? So in this first situation, let me zoom in here, where it asks us to identify the trig, we've already done that in these problems. Now you're going to have problems on Math Excel where you have to identify the trig, very similar to what we did for finding the missing side. Circle the angle, see what you have, see what you're missing, and pick sine, cosine, or tangent. Remember, sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is opposite over adjacent. Okay, so after we've done that, we have our setup, and the variable is what's in this situation. So now, in order to solve these problems, we already have the setup. We already know how to do the setup. In order to solve this, we have to use inverses. So just think about how the inverse of addition is subtraction. The inverse of multiplication is division. The inverse of squaring something is square rooting it. Well, the inverse of tangent is literally called inverse tangent. Okay, we just put a little -1 there, and it's called inverse trig. Okay, and here's how I like to show it. I draw it as an arrow, signifying I'm moving the tangent from this side to this side. And here's what's actually happening. I'm taking my trig and I'm multiplying both sides by the inverse trig. What's going to happen is going to cancel out on this side and it's going to move to the other side, which is what I'm signifying by this arrow here. And what happens is I'm left with z by itself over here, and then I have inverse tangent over here. Here's how I write inverse tangent. You have to put the -1. Parentheses 21 over 28. So now the sides end up in the parentheses for inverse tangent. For regular tangent, for regular trig, the angle's in the parentheses. For inverse trig, it's the sides that are in the parentheses. And then all we have to do is do it in the calculator. Okay, so let me show you on the school calculator. I'm going to follow these directions right here. So I'm going to do side divided by side, 21 divided by 28. I have to press equals here. If I don't press equals here, my answer will be entirely wrong. Equals gives me a decimal. That's good. And then I have to press shift. And if you look very closely, right above sine, cosine, and tangent, there is a little -1. So I pressed shift, and then I can hit that little inverse tangent. And I get z equals 36, I'm going to say 0.9 degrees. I just found this missing angle, angle z. That goes in there. Okay, I found that missing angle. I'm going to do another problem and then use the phone calculator, okay? So I'm going to do the sine one. We already did the identify. It was actually given to us to use sine. We already did the setup. Now we just have to solve. I'm going to go to inverse trig. So I'm going to move the trig to the other side. And I get c by itself. And I have the inverse of sine left over here. 28 over 35. Now in the phone calculator, it's only slightly different. Okay, let me show you the right angle. That way you can actually see it. So we'd still do side divided by side, 28 divided by 35. We have to press equals here. Equals gives me a decimal. That's a good sign. And then we do inverse sine. So right over here we press second. Now on some other phone calculators, it might say shift. Second, and we see the little sign with the -1 symbol. Inverse sine. That gives me 53.1. So I say C equals 53.1 degrees. Now, does that make sense for an angle measure? Yes, that goes right in there. That makes sense for an angle measure. It makes sense that we have a 53-degree angle. So that's very important to do as well. Make sure your answer makes sense, okay? So that is how we find the missing angle of trig, okay? We have to be given two sides and find the missing angle.